Much for being with us tonight, and Pastor Frank, thank you for wonderful words of welcome and introduction and prayer. We're so pleased to have so many who are guests with us tonight, and our membership welcomes each and every one of you. Throughout the evening, guests, if there's any way we can be of assistance to you, our members stand ready and able to be at your side and give you assistance. One of my favorite scriptures, passages, and one that I carried with me throughout my service time in the U.S. Army is found in 2 Chronicles chapter 15. It's one that you know in context and with specifics, if not entirely. Chapter 15, verse 7. But you, be strong and do not lose courage, for there is reward for your work. Veterans, thank you so very, very much for the service and sacrifice you have willingly given to your country on behalf of men and women and boys and girls. And not only to your country, but to the world for freedom, for peace. My dad fought at D-Day and Battle of the Bulge, and to his dying day prayed for peace in our world, that our soldiers, our airmen, our sailors would be home. And it's a very valid and strong prayer that we echo and share here. We're in store for a very wonderful evening tonight, and for just the next several moments, I'd like to give some words of introduction that will help us throughout the evening for our program to flow very well and smoothly, and for you to be aware of these great leaders that we have with us tonight. First, I want to recognize the gentleman who will be our MC of program tonight and lead us through the program. There will be opportunity for your questions and response by our speaker, General Shelton. Mr. Chapman will help lead that and guide that, and has several questions already in store to assist us in getting to know well our general, our guest, William Shelton. Harry Chapman, for 35 years, served on Channel 5 news anchor and did an incredible job here in Nashville. Even though he pulls for the Georgia Bulldogs, we still love him. Harry, husband, father, grandfather, deacon in First Baptist Church, service person to his community through his service at Belmont University, in his neighborhood, throughout the region for the cause of Jesus Christ. I know that you'll enjoy Harry's presence with us and his leadership in this very way as the evening goes along. And we appreciate so deeply his assistance. When I was a kid, growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I did what many of you did. I played Cowboys and Indians. I played Army. I went to church. My parents had me on the front row of church every Sunday, Sunday night, Wednesday, and whenever the doors were open, because for heaven's sakes, my mom was a church organist. And the Crow family paralleled several families in my life and in our church during those days, one of which was the Shelton family. Well, little Willie Shelton and little Tommy Crow played a lot of games together. We caught fish together. We gigged frogs together. We shot 22s together. We played Army. I don't know how anyone could have made it to the Air Force after all the Army games we played. But one of us did. Well, the young years passed. And 50 years ago, the Shelton family broke ranks. They moved from Tulsa to Oklahoma City. All 5 of them. And I didn't know what happened. They were gone one day, and I lost track of them, save for the fact that our 4 parents remained very, very close friends, and our 2 mothers were like inseparable sisters, no matter the miles apart. Well, fast forward. 2 years ago, my mother passed away. Many of you were at my side, mourning with me at my loss, caring for Jackie and me, attending to the memorial service here, and praying for us, caring for us, as First Baptist family does so incredibly. When we held the service and the family visitation in Tulsa for my mother's memorial, one of the guests at the family visitation was Mrs. Shelton. She came up from Oklahoma City to mourn the loss of her very best friend. We hugged and loved for moments together. and her daughter, Joanne, who is my age, just within weeks, visited with me. And I said, Joanne, what about little Kirby? How's he doing? Oh, she gave me an update. And I said, well, what about my buddy, little Willie? I haven't talked to him in 50 years. She stood tall and said, oh, he's not Willie anymore. He's 4-star General William Shelton. And get it straight. The light came on in September 2 years ago. I immediately made contact with General Shelton in Colorado Springs and said, please, friend, how soon can you come to Nashville and be with us as we honor our veterans and our veteran guests from around the city? Today is the day. General Shelton has been with me since last night. He participated in the Veterans Parade today down Broadway. We met hundreds of veterans throughout the city as we celebrated their service. Tomorrow, I wish you would pray for us. Through the good services of Glenda Maddox, one of our members and a Veterans Affairs nurse at the hospital, he and I will be touring the hospital and shaking hands and meeting and encouraging veterans who are finding medical care through your services by the VA. Thank you. I want to take a moment to read from his bio, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to share all of this. It's such an amazing story. Like Harry Chapman, Barry, they're on the front row. Like Harry Chapman, General Shelton, his father, husband, grandfather, 2 grandsons. He and his wife Linda live in the Colorado Springs area. They are active in their church. They're active in their faith, sharing Jesus Christ as you are and as we are. William Shelton is retired now just by 1 year after 38 years service in the United States Air Force. He retired as Commander, Air Force Space Command in September 2014. During his career, he commanded space operation units at every level and held staff positions in a wide range of Air Force and Department of Defense organizations. In his final assignment, he led a team of over 40,000 personnel at Air Force Space Command to provide space and cyberspace operational forces, as well as acquisition of space systems. In this role, he was the correct, right, upright manager of our defense funds in the amount of over $10 billion. During his career, General Shelton was a space shuttle controller for the first 18 missions, commander of the Global Positioning System, what we know as GPS, commanded all Department of Defense space operations, served as the CIO of the Air Force and director of the Air Force headquarters staff during one of the most turbulent periods in the Air Force history. While leading the Air Force Space Command, he reduced $1 billion from the operations budget while preserving vital space services. It's been very interesting to visit with General Shelton today and hear the difference he makes in our country and world even yet. He led the rapid maturation of cyberspace forces to enhance both the defensive and offensive cyber capabilities of the Air Force. He's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. I'm sorry to say they drummed the Army Academy Saturday in football. He holds a Master of Science degree in nautical engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology and a Master of Science degree in National Security Studies from the National War College. It's a true honor for us to have General Shelton, a man of faith. Would you rise and help me welcome General William Shelton?
Well, it really is a special privilege to be with you tonight. Pastor, thank you. I appreciate you letting me be here. And Tom, special thanks to you for not only for the invitation, but also for the hospitality. Jim Scholl, I got to thank you as well. I think he drew the short straw. He did a lot of the hosting of me today, so I appreciate the time that you spent today. I'd like to also add my recognition to all the veterans. I won't make you raise your hand or stand, but I just want you to know that when I was on active duty, I felt like every day I was standing on the shoulder of giants in our country. We're losing a lot of our World War II veterans. We're down to just handfuls of World War II veterans. And I think the description of them as the greatest generation is one of the most apt descriptions. We've got Tom Brokaw to thank for that. But they truly are the greatest generation of Americans that I can think of. It's popular to say thank you for your service, and while I always appreciated hearing that, it just doesn't seem like it's enough. So to you veterans, let me say thank you for underwriting the freedoms we enjoy. Thank you for the sacrifices you and your families have made over the years. And thank you for establishing the legacy of the finest military in the world, the finest military that the world has ever known, and one that I was privileged to inherit and serve in for 38 years. So let's give it up again for our veterans. Thank you. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about my story, if you will, my testimony. I'll talk about Christians serving in our military today and the challenges for those folks. A few words about how I feel about the state of our union, and I'll save as much time as we can for questions and answers, because frankly that's a lot more fun for me to hear what's on your mind and respond to your questions. If you would, join me in a quick word of prayer. Father, thank you. Thank you for the privilege of being with like-minded believers, for being with your children, your creation. And I just pray that everything that's said and done tonight will be to your glory. It's in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, as you heard from Tom, I was born in Tulsa in 1954, and you heard the stories about Harvard Avenue Baptist Church, and what he didn't say is we sat right behind him in church. So as his mom got up and played the organ and came back, I got to recognize that routine fairly early in life. And we were there just like his family. We were there every time the doors were open. But when I was 7, one night Sunday night after church, came back home and I asked my mom, what do I need to do to be saved? And she led me to the Lord, got down on my knees and prayed, and the next Sunday I was baptized. And all I can say, and I'm sure many of you would say this too, thank God for Christian parents, right? You really get started off right in life and in the right values for sure. Well, you heard Tom say we moved to Oklahoma City because of my dad's job, and that was when I was 9 years old, and I graduated from a high school just south of Oklahoma City and went off to the Air Force Academy. I'd always had an interest in airplanes, but maybe more importantly, I remember getting up, in fact, my parents waking me up early so I could go in and watch those grainy black and white images of the early Mercury and Apollo launches, Gemini launches, and I was just fascinated. I was hooked. And so when I went to the Air Force Academy, I majored in astronautical engineering, and lucky enough to be in that business my entire career. I married my high school sweetheart. I don't know why, but she stayed with me for 4 years at the Air Force Academy. You couldn't get married until after you had graduated, so she had to wait for me to graduate before we could get married. We moved to California after graduation from the academy, and my Air Force career was off to a start. Along the way, we had a daughter and a son, both of whom eventually became Air Force officers. My daughter's a flight surgeon. We're lucky enough to have her right there in Colorado Springs. She and her husband got assigned there in Colorado Springs, so our 2 grandsons are there. And we count it as a privilege from the Lord to have grandsons in town with us for probably 2.5 years here, so we'll see how that goes. My son just separated from active duty, but he's flying with the West Virginia Air National Guard, so he's still serving as well. Now, you heard that I went off to graduate school. After graduate school, they sent me to Houston to work on the space shuttle program. And as Tom said, I served on the first 18 space shuttle missions in mission control. There are a few times in life where something you do during the day is national news that night. And that's exactly what that was like. I mean, it was the first of everything in the shuttle program. You know, first multi-day mission, the first extravehicular activity, the first satellite repair, all those kinds of things happened in those first 18 missions. So just incredibly rewarding. Staff assignments along the way. Those of you that have been in the military know that nobody wants staff assignments. They're a necessary evil, but needless to say, those came along and I got to do those. But going to command the GPS squadron as we were just building that constellation was also a remarkable privilege. And having us go to war for Desert Storm in January 1991 with the nation counting on GPS to be there when we needed it. Again, just unbelievably rewarding. Well, the good jobs kept coming. The family was still doing well, and so we just kept going job to job. And somebody would ask me, are you going to make the Air Force a career? And my standard answer was, well, as long as I keep getting good jobs and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I'll stay with it. Well, I look back on that and I think, well, that's a little selfish, really. But that was really the way I felt at the time, and all of those conditions kept being met, so we stayed with it. Eventually had the privilege of commanding all Department of Defense space operations. That includes Air Force Space launches from Cape Canaveral in Florida and out at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. All Department of Defense satellites, and by the way, we've got over 100 satellites up there doing Department of Defense business. Most people don't know that. Most people think the only people in space are NASA. Not true. We've got a big space program, and as Tom said, it's about $10 billion a year. So a lot of work going on in space. And you heard that my last job was commanding Air Force Space Command, so got into the cyber business as well during that job. So lots of good fortune along the way. Certainly God's blessings as we continued to serve in the Air Force. And as I've kind of outlined briefly, a lot of personally rewarding experiences. Linda and I decided to retire in the Colorado Springs area. We live just west of Colorado Springs, about 12 miles west. And it's on a place that only our God could have created because of its natural beauty. It is just a fabulous place. Now, she's got 2 inches of snow that she's dealing with today. So last time I talked to her, she was shoveling the back patio. I'll pay for that. I'm now an independent consultant, and I serve on a couple of boards, but it keeps me on the road more than I would like. But, you have to go where the customer wants you to be if you're going to be in that kind of business. One of the things I miss in retirement, however, is all the people that I worked with. Really, really quality people. The old saying that they're all pulling on the rope in the same way, that's unique, I think, in the United States military. And I do miss that. These are dedicated, hardworking, committed people who serve the nation, and they don't just worry about themselves, for sure. And most importantly, I've met many, many men and women that are people of strong faith. These are difficult times for our people in military service, Christians in military service today. There are lots of restrictions on what you can say, when you can say it, and how you express your faith. There are many atheistic organizations out there that are just looking for someone to stub their toe by their definition of stubbing their toe. And they are quick to point out and try to make national news. That's how they exist, by the way, is they make news and get contributions to their cause. So they are looking for every opportunity to make news. And it often is detrimental to people's careers. So you learn to be careful, but when I got discouraged about such things, it seems like the Lord put somebody in my life that I hadn't known was a Christian before. And it's another believer coming alongside you who lives not just by word, but by deed. And once they were kind of identified and you watched how they lived, you knew that they were people of God. And so even at very senior levels within our military, God has a cadre of believers that are serving inside our military, having to serve quietly, but they are serving and certainly living the Christian life and conducting themselves in a manner that's faithful to the Lord. We went through some serious illnesses with my wife over the last few years, and people came forward that I had no idea that they even knew, but more importantly, that they were strong in faith and they were praying for her. And I have no doubt that our God healed my wife due to those strong prayers that were occurring all over the world. I'm even much more a believer in the power of prayer than I ever was based on personal experience over the last 4 years. So I think you can be proud of all these people. I think you can be confident that there is a strong moral fiber that still runs through our military and binds us together still today. I promise to be brief. So on this Veterans Day, I want to close with some thoughts on our country. You know, the consulting business, as I said, makes me travel around the country. I get to D.C. quite often. And one of the things I really like to do when I'm there is I like to get my exercise by running on the Capitol Mall. So it takes me by the national monuments. I don't know, somehow that's very uplifting to see the history of our country as you're running along. I do really kind of do some of my best thinking while I'm running, probably to keep my mind off the pain of running. But I don't know, there's clarity of thought that occurs for some reason while you're running. So recently I was there, and as I ran by the Washington Monument, you know, I wondered how George Washington, who fought so hard to create us as a nation, wondered how he would view us today if he were alive. Then I ran by the Lincoln Memorial, a man who led this country in unbelievable circumstances, nearly impossible circumstances. What would he think about what we've become as a nation? And then I ran by the White House, a symbol of the greatest nation on the planet, bar none, no doubt about it. And I wondered how our nation can survive with such deep divisions and really a lack of government unity on almost anything, certainly among the major issues. And it was kind of depressing, you know, and I don't mean to depress you. But then, you know, the Lord kind of has a way of reminding you of just how shallow your thinking can be. And I just finished a study on Revelation. I don't know about you, but Revelation's a mystery to me. And I just decided I was going to do some study on it to try to figure out some things and hopefully gain better insight into the symbolism that's in that book. And of course, I think the biggest takeaway and the thing that was most uplifting to me is we know how this turns out, don't we? We really do. I can get depressed and I can think about the state of our nation, but we know how this ultimately turns out. The struggles of today, while they're certainly troubling, are only the preliminaries for the triumphant return of our Lord and Savior. Amen? In military terms, Satan's getting tactical victories out of all this, but the strategic outcome is already decided for us as Christians. I think our outrage at events in our country is certainly justified. But the Lord keeps reminding me that my focus needs to be heavenly, not earthly. In Romans 13, 1 and 2, Paul wrote, "Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against that authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves." So, I might be mad at the president. I might be mad at Congress. But the Bible clearly teaches me that if I'm rebelling against that authority, I'm rebelling against authority that God has placed in positions of power. Pretty clear teaching. And I need to remember that God's in control of all things. In Matthew 24, Jesus foretold what we're going through today. He said, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. What a tremendous promise for us as believers. And we've got to believe that, and we've got to claim that promise. So I need to stand firm. We all need to stand firm in these trying days. Jesus told us we're the salt and the light of the earth today, and we need to be that. And thinking about eternity, which for me is hard to fathom, by the way. Just the concept of eternity is hard to fathom. But I find John's words in Revelation 21 to be very comforting. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." Amen. Amen. Well, since I'm in Tennessee, I'm going to quote a line from a Tennessee Ernie Ford song. How many of you listened to Tennessee Ernie Ford growing up? I remember that playing on my grandmother's stereo, and I loved the sound of his voice even today. That song says, "I want to be ready, I want to be ready. I want to be ready to walk in Jerusalem just like John." Amen. Amen. Again, we know how all this ends, don't we? We know how all this ends. I pray that God gives us all strength and wisdom to be faithful and to stand firm until he makes all things new and we walk with him in the New Jerusalem. One last request. Would every one of you commit to praying for our veterans, or rather our service members, who are deployed away from their families, particularly during the holiday season? They seem to be a little bit out of the news now. They're not nearly brought to our consciousness as much. But trust me, there are a lot of people still deployed, still in harm's way. So if you would commit to pray with me for them, I would appreciate it. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing questions from you.
Before Congress so he can handle anything in the room. By the way, Sam Sanders, we want that money put in the offering plate.
I thank Sam for playing the Air Force song twice.
Yeah. So Sam, make sure that money gets in the right place. Tom, make sure of that. Let's start out with questions. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wasn't expecting that. So let's start out with questions. Go ahead.
Until that day comes about which you have just spoken, it seems that one of the biggest problems that we have to worry about in the present day is the radical jihadists that are gaining strength abroad and maybe even locally to the degree that we don't even know about. Do you think that the day will ever come when a group of nations will be able to band together to defeat this order? I mean, our president says he wants to contain them. That's not happening.
If the question is, do I think it's possible, I would tell you emphatically yes. If the question is, will it happen? That's a better question, and I'm not sure, because it takes leadership, strong leadership, by someone, and I would think that the leader of the free world would be that someone. If we're only half committed, or maybe less than half committed, we're not going to make any progress. I was at a dinner Monday night with the Prime Minister of Israel, and he was talking about how to defeat terrorism. And he said maybe 5 or 6 times, you have to commit to win. If you don't commit to win, you're never going to find peace with terrorists. The rest I'll leave unsaid, but I think you get the point. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start with this question. How is your Christian faith? You talked about you being of command of 40,000 airmen. How has that, your Christian faith, affected your decisions in that command position?
I think there's a, value of life. I mean, value of life, importance of family, importance of freedoms, all those things that come from a Christian upbringing and certainly a belief in the principles of the Bible and what Jesus taught in the New Testament. All those things, I think, come together to form kind of a worldview. And that worldview takes on maybe even probably is a unique perspective that certainly guides your decision making. And I think you have much better clarity of thought because of that. Because you're not putting your finger up in the air to see which way the wind's blowing. I mean, there are absolutes in life, whether we want to think there are or not. So many people are looking for the expedient way, when many times the expedient way is not God's way. In fact, most times it's not God's way. So I think it helps tremendously.
A lot of us think about the morale of our servicemen and women who are stationed around the world, and particularly in the Middle East. And we were talking that many times a lot of these men and women have gone back to the Middle East, not once, not twice, but maybe 8 or 9 times. How does that affect the morale? And what is, in your opinion, the morale of soldiers out there?
Yeah, I'll tell you the people that I came in contact with, they were still very dedicated. They were still working extremely hard. As I said, they're all pulling on the rope in the same direction. They're team players, but they're tired. They're tired of constant rotations back and forth. My son, I don't know how many times my son deployed. He was in a unit where they flew 2 months in theater and then rotated back home for 2 months. Back to theater for 2 months, back home for 2 months. I don't know how many times he did that, a bunch. He separated from the Air Force in July, and he had a great career going. But the force is just tired because of the high operational tempo. And so they're looking for different lifestyles. Families, it's very difficult on families, young families, that the spouse remaining has to be the single parent and has to make all the decisions. And then the reunification of those families after deployments, that's not an easy thing either. So I think it's just a tired force. They're still committed. They're still, you put them in a job and ask them to do a job, and they're going to do it to the best of their ability. But they're tired.
Harry,
Yes.
along that same line, I just heard today on the radio that some servicemen and women have been deployed 12, 15 times and more. Is there not a limit? And if there isn't a limit, what does it take to change that? Is that an act of Congress? Is that a decision by a general somewhere? Seems like there should be a limit on the amount of deployments a person can be over.
You would think so, but there is not. It is literally the needs of the nation that drive that. And those people that have deployed that often are many times in unique kinds of skilled positions. And they will, as long as the nation needs them to go, and they stay in the service voluntarily, unbelievable that they continue to do it, but they will continue to deploy. Now, I'll tell you that a lot of those people, if you got a chance to talk to them about their time deployed, they would tell you they loved what they were doing while they were deployed, but they didn't like the separation from their families. And so therein lies the rub. There's kind of a tension here between I really love my job, but I also love my family, so I'm having to choose in many cases between the two. And sometimes there are really unfortunate choices made. Breaks up families.
Yeah, Gary.
Yes, you said with the world and your freedom and terrorism, somewhat to that we may start back the draft or something or something.
I don't find the political will in the nation to do that. You know, if you look at the statistics of how many actually serve, it's a very, very small percentage. If you look at the United States Congress right now and how many have served, it is also a very small percentage. So I don't think you could generate the political will or the political capital to reinstitute a draft unless there was a national emergency.
We talked a little bit about, yes, go ahead, sir.
General Shelton, during some of the tragedies, how was your faith able to help you get through those times?
You know, I guess I don't understand how people without faith get through tough times. You know, because I turn to the Lord for help, and you know, there have been times in dealing with the Congress, there have been times in dealing with the White House where I was very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. But I also felt very bolstered by the Lord. So, you know that old saying about there are no atheists in the foxhole? Well, I was in my foxhole lots of times. Not that I was being an atheist, but boy, you know, it turned me to a lot more prayer, that's for sure.
If we could, let's talk about, kind of switch gears to talk about the space program, which you were so involved with. What is the future of the space program? How do you see our involvement in that?
Yeah, there's probably a fact that most of you don't know, and that is that anymore military operations are really dependent on space capabilities. In fact, I don't think we would know how to operate today without things like GPS, things like satellite communications, things like precise weather forecasting from space. So all those things come together to make a modern military hum. And if you took those things away, I'm not sure we would know how to fight. Well, guess what the Russians and Chinese are working on right now? They're working on counter space capabilities. So we're kind of at a fork in the road here, where if it goes down a path of truly contested space, we're going to have to become much more aggressive in space. If it stays peaceful, where people are allowed to do what they need to do in space and use their assets to their advantage, then I think we'll be okay. But we could get to a place in the not too distant future here where we're going to see conflict in space.
Yes, Frank?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm you.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Do you see our force right now as a ready and fully prepared for the readiness combat, full combat scale?
Yeah, I think preparedness for the kinds of conflict that we're fighting right now, I would say that we're okay. For full scale, you know, really what we call near peer conflict, and by that we mean Chinese and Russians. We're not ready because we haven't had time to do that kind of training. What you find is that as we prepare for low intensity conflict, all the training that goes into being prepared for high intensity conflict gets kind of pushed off to the side. So the force is not ready for a big one.
Jim?
What do you see the outcome to be about the controversy in the South China Sea with China?
It's clearly just saber rattling. We'll continue to exercise freedom of navigation through there. We'll have all kinds of meetings and all that kind of stuff, and we'll reach some sort of status quo. This can't stand. I mean, it just can't, and we won't let it. And I think they were testing our mettle a bit. We've responded. So.
Frank, I'll get to you. Jeff, you have a question?
I was going to.
Jim, Frank, you're next.
I was going to ask you to speak for just a moment to the cyberspace warfare and things that are happening there, and what you see is how threatening or how dangerous is that?
Yeah. I'd like everybody to think about what is computer controlled today. Yeah. And now think about the ability to get inside that computer and do something nefarious. That's what we're talking about. So I'm reasonably confident that should a major nation state or a talented cyber actor, maybe not even a nation state, but maybe someone that's just got the skills and maybe is working on contract for a nation state, they could do considerable harm to the United States. And it wouldn't be something that would necessarily be long-term, but it could cause considerable havoc in the United States for quite some time. What you don't hear much about is the day-to-day stuff that goes on. Banks won't tell you this, but banks literally write off billions of dollars every year in losses due to cybercrime. Now take that same kind of talent and apply it to other applications of computer-controlled kinds of things, and let your mind wander. And, Frank, I'm sorry, it's scary stuff.
Frank, my apologies. You're up.
When you spoke about the members of Congress that are not of military background serve, is that in any way affecting the funding that the military is not getting?
Yeah, thus far I wouldn't say it's affected it, but it does make the dialogue more difficult. There's not a context there, and so they are heavily reliant on staff to help them along. So I wouldn't say that that's the principal reason for a decrease in the overall level of defense spending. A lot of that's been coming from the administration, and this goofy law called sequestration, probably the dumbest piece of legislation ever written. That has kind of tripped us up for a while, and we keep going to the edge of the cliff and looking over and then backing away from it. So, God willing, we'll keep doing that. Right now we've got a 2-year reprieve, but the law on the books right now is sequestration, 2-year reprieve until fiscal year 18. So we'll be fighting the same battle we just fought 2 years from now.
Yes, you have a question, sir?
Yes, sir. My name is Ronald. I just moved here from New York. And my question is VA-based. I feel that the majority of our veterans, of course, it's based that our nation is need more assistance in medical help. But I feel that we're not getting it or receiving it, like medical help, or mental health issues, or drug-related issues. shelters, and you shouldn't be in the homeless shelters, or living on the streets. So, who do I speak to? I mean, the president maybe? Do I have to get dressed up to the president, ask for funding to help our veterans, or what?
Okay, thank you for your question.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, I tell you, you're not alone. There are many in the Congress that believe the same way you do. And I think the Senate Armed Services Committee has shown a lot of progress, and the House Armed Services Committee as well. But they've shown a lot of progress in putting pressure on veterans committees to take better care of our veterans. And I think that's going to continue to happen in this Congress. We've seen a lot of attention on particularly VA medical facilities. That pressure will continue. You've seen a lot of pressure on funding, the appropriate level of funding for the Veterans Administration, properly managed. And so I think, it may not be the level that you want it to be right now, but have faith. Have faith. I understand.
Yes, I know a lot of our choir members are getting ready to go, and let me just have this one last question. What gives you optimism as you look at our military for the future?
Mostly the people, to tell you the truth. One of the prime responsibilities in senior leadership is training your replacement and your replacements. And so I know these people. And I know who's coming behind, and I know what kind of people they are. I know what kind of talent they've got. I know what kind of motivation they've got. And as I said, I believe there's still a very strong moral fiber running through our military. I believe that there's a lot of talent that's there. So I'm optimistic about our military. Regardless of the political situation, you need to understand that our military is going to remain very strong because of the people that are in it.
Thank you, General Shelton.